My name is Carol Peters, and I'm proud to serve as the leader of United Way Next. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to two of my friends, Dawn and Neil, who are going to actually do our presentation. Before they get started, though, I wanted to give you just what we're calling a trigger warning. Because the subject is on mental health, there may be some sensitive subjects discussed, and we just wanted people to know that if there's conversation around sexual abuse or something that makes you kind of cause to pause and you need to go off screen, we will understand that. So we are recording the session so that we can use this content later for others who may have missed the session. And I just make you aware of that. So if there is any storytelling, that you're aware of the fact that it is being recorded. So thanks again, everybody, for joining. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Neil and Dawn.
Thanks, Carol. I want to say a quick hello to everyone who's here. I love being part of United Way Next. Good to see some familiar faces, Barbara and Dick in particular. Good to see you all. And Carol, thank you for having us on World Mental Health Day. This was planned. We coordinated this. We knew that this was intentional. It's actually what we were talking about before the show, that I thought, Carol, you were going to tell people it was intentional, but you gave up. You gave it up pretty quickly. But thank you, everyone, for joining. I see a few other people are just joining as well. So we're going to share, as Carol mentioned, and we talked about in the promotions, how Dawn and I have used our personal stories about mental health to focus on mental wellness. And we're going to have time for questions at the end. We'll keep an eye on the chat as well. If there are burning questions that come up, we'll certainly do our best to get to them sooner rather than later. So just a quick overview. Really, our focus today is on a live stream show that Dawn and I co-host called Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. We do this show 2 times a month, the second and fourth Thursdays of the month. That's usually when we do our shows at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Central. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but what I like about the platform we use is that we are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and my website at the same time. So we're trying to find people wherever they're at, whatever they're comfortable using. They have different ways to watch the show. We're actually both live on both my Facebook page and Dawn's Facebook page, and both of our Instagram accounts as well. So it's been a great journey. We started the show in February of this year, and we're actually getting ready for episode 17 next week, which we'll tell you about at the end of today's session. So as far as kind of how we got here, I think is really interesting and really a little bit, kind of tied to the trigger warning that Carol shared in the beginning. Last year, before we do that, I want to properly introduce ourselves. I worked at United Way of Snohomish County for about 4 years, and then worked at United Way Worldwide for 5 years as the director of network communications. And I've been part of United Way Next for the last 4 years, ever since I left United Way Worldwide. I've been working with a consulting firm called Digimentors for the last 4 years. We do social media, websites. We do a lot of work around AI as well, and we produce live stream events like this, like the one that we are going to be talking about. Dawn, do you want to talk a little bit about your background?
Sure. Hello, everybody. So grateful and happy to be here with all of you. Thanks. Shout out to my United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha County friends that popped on today. I kind of gave a plug for this show in an email I wrote yesterday, so I appreciate that, Bob Faraday. So good to see you as well. So my background is that I've been at the United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha County. I just celebrated 19 years on October 4th. I love my job and I love the people that I work with. I also have several other hobbies. One as a sexual violence advocate and speaker for the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, which we'll talk a little bit later about my experience and how I sort of got to this point of co-hosting this show with Neil. I also am an adjunct professor at Alverno College, where I do a lot of teaching around nonprofit management, social science, and program evaluation. And I am a brand new recent author. My book just got published September 20th, called The Blue Flower Curtain. So I've got a lot of things going on in my life, and I love every minute of it.
Dawn, in case you didn't notice, this is The Blue Flower Curtain, Dawn's book that just came out. Was that last week, Dawn? It's only been a week.
September
right?
20th.
September 20th. Yeah. Okay, so a few weeks now.
Yep.
But when we share the deck, all of these, as you can see, are hyperlinks. And we certainly will call out the link to her book so that you could take a look. Certainly, I think you'll find it fascinating and really powerful. So as far as how the show came about, what we were talking about, and I'll actually take it back, not so much in terms of looking at the next slide, but I go back to a dinner that I had with Dawn, and this was at the Great Rivers Conference several years ago. I want to say 2018 or so, kind of thereabouts. It was, and another colleague, Kelsey Collier from Vermilion, South Dakota, was there, and we were talking. I first met Dawn at a Great Rivers Conference, where she mentioned that she was a survivor of sexual assault, and I just kind of she was an advocate and very outspoken about it. I just kind of put that in the back of my mind. I didn't. I introduced myself, but didn't say anything at the time. And then when we were having dinner a couple of years later, I mentioned, after I had shared with her that I too am a survivor of sexual abuse from when I was little, I told her and Kelsey that I actually am more comfortable talking about or sharing my story about being abused than I am talking about my own mental health issues. I felt there was more of a stigma. I was more scared of telling anyone that I see a therapist or that I suffer from anxiety and occasional depression. And so that's how kind of this show came about. In 2023, I co-hosted a show with a mutual friend of ours, Candice Sanchez from Milwaukee, Unspoken Conversations with Candice. She dedicated season 3 to male survivors of sexual abuse after hearing me tell my story, and I ended up co-hosting and producing the show for her. And every month, we interviewed different men who would share their stories. Mental health kept coming up as a topic, and I started sharing a little bit about my own challenges. After that run was over, after the show, kind of was coming toward the end, it was a monthly show for that 1 year. I got the crazy idea that, well, if I could spend the whole year talking about my experience being abused, I could tackle what felt like a bigger issue for me, mental health. And it was kind of a challenge that I put to myself. So I called Dawn and asked her if she would be a guest on the show, because she had been an inspiration for me this whole time. And I want to say that, I never would have said these words out loud before we launched this show, particularly in a professional setting, particularly with colleagues. I was too afraid to even say the words that I see a therapist. But I called Dawn and I said, I have this crazy idea. Would you be a guest on the show? Dawn, would you like to take the story from there?
Sure. And in true fashion, I said to Neil, I would love to be a guest, but how about if we co-host the show together? And Neil right away was like, that's that sounds like a possible idea, a good plan. And I think I threw him off a little bit by saying I wanted to co-host it. But mental health for me has been a really long journey, and I've suffered from mental health issues since the time that I was very young, um, and experienced a really traumatic experience um, that increased and enhanced my mental health experience. So I suffer from anxiety and depression as well, along with PTSD. And so I've talked very openly on all my social media channels about my mental health issues. And I felt really, really comfortable co-hosting a show like this. And so I thought it would be a good balance for Neil, who was, really a little apprehensive about talking about mental health, to have a co-host who really just kind of spills her guts about mental health issues like on a constant basis.
Dawn is, I think she just made the understatement of the year. I don't know that I was apprehensive. I was scared out of my mind. Let's just be very honest about that. I in promoting this on social media, the way that I've approached social media in my career is that I kind of let down that guard between work and personal. Some people I know don't friend anybody from work on social media, on Facebook, for example. I've always had an integrated approach to it, and particularly if we're sharing this on LinkedIn, to me it was a huge leap to do this. So this is the blog post that Dawn wrote for our first episode, talking about her mental health journey. For me, it was talking about. I'm sorry that it's opening up the blog post, but for me, it was just stating what I said earlier, that I suffer from anxiety and occasional depression. But really, what was driving me was this idea that I didn't want to feel embarrassed about it anymore. I didn't want to feel like I couldn't be my true, authentic self. And it's gotten to the point where, because I share this via email with people, and we'll talk about our email list later, but just this morning, I had a client meeting, and I was able to tell her that, I mentioned it in a meeting we had last week, and said, "Hey, just want to make sure you're okay with my sharing about my anxiety sometimes, and sometimes I get overwhelmed with work, and it doesn't mean that I can't get the job done. It just means that sometimes I take a beat, and sometimes I get take a day or two to get my head back on straight." And she was perfectly fine with that. What I found is that people have really embraced that and have been incredibly supportive. When I've shared and kind of been open about that, so that's been very gratifying. As far as the episodes are concerned, we've done 17 episodes. We actually have like 12 on the slide. We've covered a range of different issues, as you can see here. And again, all of these are links to the actual episodes. If you want to watch any of these, if any of these kind of resonate with you, you're welcome to take a look at it. I think that each one of these is very personal for Dawn and I, and we find a way to kind of share our own experience and our own story, connecting with all of these. Dawn, can you say a bit about episode 3? We had a very special guest on that episode.
We did have a very special guest on that episode. My husband was actually the guest on that episode, and that episode really, I thought, was so phenomenal, because when you're dealing with mental health, I think you have people who are extroverts like myself and Neil, who handle anxiety and depression differently than people who are introverts. And my husband and I have had to really support each other in how we both go about managing through episodes of anxiety and depression. And so that conversation, I think, was really informative around how people present or go about um, uh, walking that journey through mental health, depending upon how they identify in their personalities. And I think that that was just a really strong episode to really showcase that.
Another episode that really meant a lot to me was the next episode, Depression in the Workplace. And our guest was actually a New York Times restaurant critic that I had interviewed on another show a couple years before. But he was literally on top of the world in the mid 80s, early 90s. He was the guy in the New York City dining scene. And he shared with us that the entire time that he was doing his job, he was struggling with depression, struggling with overwhelming anxiety to the extent that he actually had to leave the job. He had to walk away, go to his editor and say that I can't do this anymore. So we talked about how it plays out in various workplaces. And I was able to share, my own experience with a job I had before I joined United Way of Snohomish County in Washington State. I worked for a nonprofit, and I had a bit of a breakdown. I hit a wall, and I was able to come back after several weeks and talk to my boss and kind of do mea culpas with the rest of our team. But that was a really big thing, and really showed how people struggle with telling their boss, telling their coworkers, etc. Another episode that really hit home for us was focusing on teen girls and therapy. And I'd like to point out that the guest on that show was Sarah Wilson, who was a former colleague of mine at United Way of Snohomish County. She left and went on to be a therapist, and talked about the work she does with teen girls in particular. Dawn, do you want to share kind of what your thoughts were on that episode?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought the best part about that episode was that so Neil has a 9, 10, 11, 11-year-old 11-year-old girl, and I have a 23-year-old girl, and we were kind of coming from two polar opposite perspectives, because he has a girl that's really in the throes of preteenhood, and mine is just finally like out of that stage, and a real adult with a real job, and her mom's more her friend now than just this angsty teenager. And so it was a really good conversation about giving specifically girls but also boys space, and really reducing that stigma around mental health, so that kids don't feel as though they have to hide their feelings when their feelings are really strong, and sometimes not good. So I really appreciated that episode.
And for me, what was great was that Sarah shared kind of a framework, like issues that she discusses with her, that comes up with her clients around social media, around body image, academic stress, etc., sexuality as well. What I did, in the week leading up to that episode, I actually talked to my daughter about those same topics, and I kind of almost like a quasi interview. But what was great is that I actually shared her answers, and then she reviewed my blog post, made a couple of edits before I published it. So it opened up a conversation, which is not always easy with 11-year-old girls. But it gave a chance to talk about some of those issues, which are really important. The other issues the other episodes rather that we had included the pros and cons of in-person and online therapy, nature is the best medicine. We had a guest who talked about how important it was to get out in nature to calm his anxieties. But we also did a show about the importance of community support, particularly NAMI. And when I, thought about that episode, I actually realized that I have not engaged in any kind of group therapy or reached out to any organizations for any kind of weekly support. I've been in therapy on and off for 30 years or so, with gaps based on when we moved to another city and it took time to find a therapist. But really the support structure, the community support that I've created is the show itself. We'll mention later, we get about 80% of the audience is a return audience. So it really is developing a community, and the support that I've gotten from people who watch the show, people who respond to social media posts, to emails, that's what's really made a difference for me. Dawn, you've also had some experience with NAMI as well, right?
Yeah, so back when I experienced my trauma, I was kind of like it was 30 years ago, and there wasn't as much advocacy or support around sexual violence survivors, and so I was just kind of like handed a pamphlet and like walked out of the hospital with not really knowing what I was going to do next. I was completely traumatized and scared out of my mind. It wasn't until several years later that I found sources like NAMI and the Healing Center, and support groups that I could use to kind of help me feel like I wasn't so alone. Because at the time that I was raped, I really truly felt like there was like no one else on the planet who had experienced what I had experienced. I had no idea how prevalent that issue was until many, many years later. So really understanding that there was community support out there that I could turn to when I needed it was really critical in my healing journey, for sure.
And so when we share this deck, we'll have links, like I said, to all of these episodes. But what we mentioned was that this show, I think, is unique in some ways, and we use a platform called StreamYard to produce the show. So I mentioned earlier, we can stream it to multiple social media sites at the same time. 80% of the audience is a return audience, but to me, the kind of secret weapon, if you will, the thing that makes the show so powerful is the audience interaction, the comments that we get during the show. So I'm going to play a quick video clip. The sound is off, so I'm going to talk through it. But this is an episode we had with Kate Easton talking about parenting children with different mental health challenges. And you can see Rose Horowitz put in a comment, "It's so devastatingly hard." Rochelle Philippek. We can read these comments on the screen. People see their name and face. They feel a part of the show. They feel like they're actually included in the process. And you can see we can run a ticker across the top with information. We can change the layout. Sometimes Dawn is in the center, sometimes I'm in the center. I think you saw Kate in the center earlier as well. Ship Crystal sent love, for example. It just makes, we can read people's names and take questions in real time, which is great. So I think that's probably one of the better parts of the show that we do. We've talked about this a little bit, what this show has meant for us. It's given us a chance to talk about these issues in a more structured way. It's given us a chance to get things off our chest. There are a couple of blog posts that we're linking to here that we'll share the images of in just a moment. But we both talked about the Teen Girls in Therapy piece, so I linked directly to those blog posts. On the self-care one, I wrote that blog post when our friend Stephen Kaplan talked about how he goes out into nature to help calm himself. That's what self-care means to him. And for me, I actually approached it a little differently. I talked about about all the self-care I'm not doing, and how stressful that was. That there were a number of things that I should be doing for myself: better sleep, better eating, a little exercise, but even being more regular with my blood pressure medication, which my sister was watching the show and she was a little alarmed that I wasn't taking it as regularly as I should. But the thing that was, not too alarmed, I reassured her during the show. But what was important, I think, for me was that being able to put that out there and just be honest, it helped with accountability. And really, after that show, I've been much better about taking my medication. I'm using my CPAP machine a little bit more. I've been getting out for walks. So it's even if other people aren't watching, if other people aren't getting something out of the show, and I don't know they are, I know that I'm getting something out of it personally. Just like I did with that show around male survivors of sexual abuse, it helped me process my feelings. Dawn, you had a blog post about your mom that we shared. You want to talk about that a little bit, what that meant for you?
Yeah. So the blog posts actually, besides the show, which the show for me is very therapeutic, and I learn something every single show that we have, which to me learning is just so important. But the blog post for me, because I'm a writer and I like to journal things and I like to process my feelings through writing. So the blog post that I wrote about my mom, who passed away 4 years ago, was really, really cathartic and very therapeutic for me. Since my mom was like my greatest champion after my assault. And she really, really had to be my rock. And I can't even imagine, as a parent of two children, what it must have been like for her to have to sit and watch her daughter just mentally disappear and suffer through such great bouts of depression and anxiety and mental health issues. And the only thing that I could really equate it to was when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And I had to be the one to sit by her side, and watch her as she suffered through the fate of dying from cancer. And I felt like it was just cathartic to write about that, because I had, in my mind, I had been there and I had grieved and mourned, but I had never really put the two things together of how important it was for us as mother and daughter to share that experience of being there for each other in the ways that we were there for each other. So that those writing of those blogs, in and of itself, I think is mental health therapy for me, on a biweekly basis.
Absolutely. It certainly plays that role for me as well. Here are the blog posts that we were talking about just now, and these are all linked in the deck when you get to them. Nature walks are good, but is it the right place to start with self-care? And the pull quote I had was, I think I get overwhelmed thinking about the possibilities. Self-care is absolutely important, but where do I start? Not knowing where to start leads to paralysis and not starting anywhere. And that was just I was just trying to be as authentic and as real as possible. We'll go to the next slide. This was Dawn's teen, let me show right. Yeah, the teen one. The negative self-talk started in high school. It continues to this day. Finding the right way to love yourself should definitely begin between the ages of 13 and 23. Certainly not, shouldn't wait until you're 52. This is the one I wrote about the conversation with my daughter about mental health, which, if nothing else, I mean, of all these episodes, I mean, each one is special and each one has really has a unique place for each of us, but I think long term, I think this is probably going to be the one that is the most meaningful, just in terms of for anyone who has, younger children, and or if your children are grown, that conversation when they're preteens and teens can be so difficult sometimes. And this really was like, it was a real conversation with her. Like, she sat down, she didn't try and run away, she didn't try and okay, can I go back to YouTube or whatever? Like, she stuck with me, and we talked through these issues, which was great. And then this is the one that Dawn wrote about her mom, which is, again, we mentioned the trigger warning at the top. It's not just rape, but also her mom's cancer. Just very powerful, very meaningful stuff. And so, as we come to a close in terms of what we wanted to present to you today, and really leave some time for conversation and discussion, I can't tell you how thrilled I am to have Stephen Berbecco on. He's with United Way of Northwest Vermont, and he's going to be talking about his mental health initiative, their mental health initiative, on our show. They focus on addressing Vermont's critical labor shortage of mental health providers, strengthening and aligning resources for suicide prevention, and responding to the acute rise in youth mental health needs. That show will be next Thursday, October 17th, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific. It for me, it's a worlds collide type moment in more ways than you can realize. When I was working at United Way Worldwide as the director of network communications, my role was to uplift local United Ways and put a spotlight on the work that they were doing. The fact that I get to do that now through this new venture is just, it fills my heart. Like, I'm so glad that I can do this. Stephen is also a friend I know from high school and from college. So there's just all sorts of circles that are coming together. But hopefully you'll get a chance to join us. Dawn will also be sharing about what her United Way does around mental health, particularly with mental health with teens. So it should be a really great show, and we'll make sure to share that link. And yeah, it is an incredibly small world. And I'm seeing this this chat from Nancy N. Pinto. I want to make sure it's Nancy, because sometimes I forget, that it was a terrific episode with the restaurant critic. She's driving and can't talk, but I'm making a note on the phone calendar to listen every few weeknights. That's so great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Like I said, so after that, here's a link directly to the show. And I'm actually going to show you what our webpage looks like real quick. For every show, we set up a post on my website with the show card. We'll include links to find the show on various platforms, some background on the show. Once we write our blog post, we include links there as well. But you'll be able to watch the show right here, even if you're not on social media, and it gives it a permanent home, which I think is great. And so, we have a mailing list. If you send me an email to neil@digimentors.group, we can add you to our list. We hope that you might be interested. And we also have the website, neilparekh.org, Shining Light on Shadows, where you can find all of our episodes and all of the blog posts. So with that, we're going to open it up for Q&A and any comments that people might have, any thoughts. Pat is asking for the link to the Blue Flower Curtain. Absolutely. I'll put that in the chat right now. So you don't have to wait for the spreadsheet the slides to come out. So I will drop that in for you. And certainly encourage you to take a look at that. Powerful book. And I know that Dawn went back to the court transcripts to put the book together. So it's really, really powerful. I'll put that here as a link for Dawn's book.
Thank you, Neil.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that.
Always. And I'll hold it
Dawn,
up as well, because you always want to hold up the book. This is the Blue Flower Curtain,
I
in
have
case
it
you didn't see it
too.
earlier.
well, we want to take the time to open it up and really just, encourage people to engage and maybe ask questions, or if there's any commentary. Someone at the beginning, I think it was Andrea, privately messaged me by mistake and said she really appreciated that you're sharing all the links to this. What a incredible opportunity for us to hear about both your personal stories, which inspired you to want to create this, but also the resources that are now available to everybody who's either participating today or listening to this later, right? And I've seen your show, I remember when it came out, I shared it on my Facebook page personally, and I actually had somebody reach out to me afterwards who was a United Way professional that was friends with me and said, she had participated in one of your very first shows and was so grateful for the information because she was just going through a really difficult time and just appreciated the fact that you're shining the light on this and that it's okay and people can, feel the way they feel and express it in this community and feel accepted and it's okay. So thanks to, Neil and Dawn both. I just really appreciate it. I see a hand up, Dick Aft. Do you want to go ahead and unmute? And then next after Dick, we'll have Doris.
Sure. Well, thank you both for a very important presentation. It certainly helped my understanding and appreciation of what fellow human beings have to deal with. And both of you seem to be dealing so well. My question is about those people who haven't found paths to deal with the issues, the trauma. Any thoughts from either of you, Dawn or Neil, about the people who can't get on the right path?
Sure. So thank you, Dick. Appreciate you asking the question. And it's always a pleasure to see you. I want to just for everyone to know, I started going to United Way Next events because of the history sessions with Dick. And that was always a highlight for me. So thank you for that. As far as, one of the things that has been very meaningful to me is that, as Carol mentioned, people have reached out with personal messages. Every time we have a show or when we first announced the show. I think that's really, it's the one-on-one conversation that opens up that possibility. When you talk about it, I mean, and we didn't mention this earlier, but really the whole point of the show is to reduce the stigma around mental health, to normalize the conversation, to make it okay for people to say that they're having difficulties. There's a little bit of a generational shift from what I understand, that younger generations are more comfortable talking about this. Dawn and I both feel like we're kind of in the middle. It's not quite as comfortable for where we are and what our experience has been in the workplace. And certainly for folks who are more senior to us, it's even more challenging. But for people who are not ready to talk about it publicly, reaching out to someone who you feel is would potentially be supportive, who would understand, is really the first step. And we've seen that just from the comments and stuff that we've gotten after shows. I hope that helps, Dick.
And I'm going to address this too, Neil, because I think, sometimes people are in a place where they can't reach out. They're not mentally able to, because their suffering is so great. And in those instances, I would say that if you see someone who's really, really struggling, empathy is really a great tool, where if you just acknowledge that they don't seem to be in a very good place and that you're available, if they, want to talk or they need anything, that can do wonders for somebody. What I don't suggest is saying, boy, you seem like you're really crazy right now. Like, being very careful with the words that you say and how you approach somebody who really seems like they're in a terrible place and have not found a great path. It took me so many years, many years to get to the point where I felt like I was on a path to healing. And sometimes it takes people a while to get there if they can, depending upon the type of trauma that they've experienced, I think. I don't know if that helps, but that would be what I would say.
It does, but your comment that if someone approaches me, if someone approached me, I personally would be very anxious that I don't have the skill or the capacity to be helpful.
Yes. I tell people all the time that I'm not a therapist, but I have plenty of resources that I can share to help them. It is very anxiety provoking because you don't want to say or do the wrong thing. So the best thing I think in those types of situations is to really say, I have some things that, there are some resources that are available. Here's a hotline that you can call if you want to be anonymous, if you want to text somebody, and I care about you and I want to see you get the help that you need. But yes, it is very anxiety provoking.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Dick. Appreciate that. And I guess, Doris, do you have a question?
Yeah, I had moved my microphone. I was wondering if Dawn could talk a little bit about the book and kind of maybe what to expect if we were going to read it, like without ruining it. But it seems like it could be a very challenging read emotionally. So just to hear a little more about it from you.
Yes, it is a very challenging read. Everyone that has read it so far has told me that it is an easy but difficult read. So it speaks to the details of my assault, but not like graphic details. But I think the hardest chapter in there is the transcripts from the trial that I had to be a part of, where you actually hear the words from the judge, you hear the words from the perpetrator, and you hear the words from myself and my mom. So if getting through the first 18 chapters can be challenging. I've had people say, I read it in an afternoon, I couldn't put it down. And other people say, I had to take it in small doses. I had to take it chapter by chapter. So I think it just kind of what place you might be in or what trauma you might have experienced. I will say the second half of the book is really the healing journey part that really people have told me that they've found to be inspirational, and just kind of how you work your way through those really challenging mental health episodes that happen, and how resiliency and perseverance is I think a thing that 99% of people who experience trauma are equipped with. That most of us have a story, and inside that story, we have the ability and power to get through anything that comes our way. And I think that that's true about anybody who's faced any type of trauma, whether it's divorced parents, losing a child, sexual assault, domestic violence, whatever your story may be. And it really, the other piece of the book is that it talks a lot about victim blaming, which is something that I'm incredibly passionate about. Intentional and unintentional victim blaming that happens to a lot of survivors of sexual assault. And so that's kind of the sum of it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Barbara?
Yeah, thank you both for your wonderful work, and it's totally heartwarming to be part of this conversation. given that the United Way Network prides ourselves in trying to be a caring community, and both of you have been in United Way workplaces for a long time, I wonder what advice you would give to United Way leaders, and or what would be your wish list about what would make United Way workplaces a better place for people who are dealing with trauma and having mental health issues.
That's a
big question, but
it's a huge
Sure.
question. It's a great question. I'm going to turn that over to Dawn, actually, because she's been with her United Way for, as she said, 19 years, United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha County. And Dawn, you've had a good experience there, right?
I have. I actually, one of my blog posts is specifically directed towards that because I came into my United Way after only about 5 years after I was assaulted. And I had an experience where one of my perpetrators was getting out of jail, and I was afraid for my life. And my victim witness advocate said, you need to go to your job and you need to explain the situation to them so that if you don't show up for work one day, that they're spot on. So I had to go in to my HR department and explain to them my situation. And the amount of care and support that I received was exponential in my healing journey. And going to my boss and not being able to like actually retell the story to my boss and like actually handing her a newspaper article and saying like, here, you need to read this. This is about me. I can't say these words out loud. And her saying to me, if you ever want to get into sexual violence advocacy, let me know and I will make that a part of your job. I will help support you in that way. And eventually they gave me 5% of my job to be able to sit on boards that revolved around sexual violence advocacy, to give presentations around sexual violence advocacy. And that was so critical for me. It was just a small slice. It was a very small slice of my job. And it didn't have anything to do. I'm the director of data and measurement at my United Way. And they like wrote this into my job description so that I could actually do those things that I needed to do that helped me heal, while also letting me do my job, my main job, and paying me for that as well. But I would say that understanding that mental health is something that 90% of people in a workplace have to deal with. Having personal days or mental health days intertwined with sick days, so that if I can't physically come into work, but I'm not sick, that I can say, I need a mental health day or I need a personal day today. And I can take that and I don't have to feel guilty or bad about that. Understanding that sometimes people need a break and that I'm not going to be able to sit at my desk for 8.5 hours a day, that I get up and I can walk around or I can take a walk outside. We have a walking club at our United Way, which is really nice. So if somebody at 2 o'clock in the afternoon is like, whew, I need to get outside, they'll send a text via Teams and say, hey, I'm going to take a walk around the neighborhood. Anybody want to come? And, people who are ready and need to get outside will take 15 minutes, 20 minutes and go take a walk. So those are just some of the things that I found to be really, really helpful from my perspective, from my particular United Way.
Thank you, Dawn. That was great. I want to read a couple of comments from Ivy, who is from Sioux Empire United Way. If you see it in the chat, being vulnerable yourself can also create a more welcoming environment for others to see you as a safe place to share and ask for help too. That's certainly been my experience. And she also wrote, being conscious and considerate to ask individuals if they have the time and capacity for you to share is also a great tool. This can help prepare you to listen and even relieve a little bit of the anxiety. Dawn, I should say, she also seems very jealous of the fact that you get to use some of your work time to be an advocate. I actually didn't know that myself, that you had 5%
I don't anymore. I have a new different job, but I did
You
in
did.
the past when
You did.
yeah.
Well, but
I want to
even
make that clear because I've got United Way folks of mine that are sitting on here,
right.
but at this point I don't, but I did in the beginning, and that was really beneficial for me.
No, and I'm glad you clarified that. And I'll say in my current situation, it is really important. You may have seen on the show cards that the show is produced by Digimentors, the company that I work with. It's a consulting firm, but the fact that they give me the time and space to produce the show and the resources, and not only that, but they actually actively promote it. And many of my colleagues are often watching the show and commenting, makes a big difference. So I do want to share some breaking news in terms of an upcoming show. We talked about Stephen Berbecco from United Way of Northwest Vermont being on next week. But January 9th, we are going to have Carol Peters on the show. Now, I don't know what episode number it's going to be yet because we're not going to have shows over the holidays. And I'm not exactly sure what the topic is. We did talk a while ago. I know that Carol, you have served as an advocate for your children going through the school system and dealing with some mental health issues. So I think that we may be focusing around that. But thank you for being willing to be on our show, Carol, in the new year.
Thank you. Wow, you put that together quick. I love it. I love that you've got me on here. And I will just say this to everybody. For those of you who I know personally, I think I'm a fierce advocate. And I'm a firm believer. I love some of the commentary that Ivy put in the chat, coming with empathy and listening to people's stories and also being vulnerable and not afraid to share. I used to say to people when I worked at the United Way, it seemed strange that I actually had a lot of stories that I could personally share about my personal journey with donors and agency directors and others in my community. But my family, as blessed as we were, we went through trying times, from the time I was a little girl all the way through and until now. You just never know how life, when life happens. And so specifically, though, I shared with Neil that when I speak on this show, I think it would be great to talk about how we can choose to be advocates for our children or grandchildren or other children in our lives, and that we oftentimes may be unsure, but if we are committed to their, journey and we want to help them, there's a way to do it. And things that my husband and I did for our own children that really helped me understand the importance of it. And then also being sought out by other parents and used as a resource in our school district, because this school district superintendent, the principals, the guidance counselors, they knew we had been through something, and we basically raised our hand and said, you can call on us. And then we had people calling us in the evening, still on our old landline, to say, I'm a parent, this is who I am, this is what I'm experiencing. And for me, that true journey was always one to try to provide people with hope when they're in a place that's really difficult. It's not that I knew all the answers. I certainly wasn't a mental health counselor, but if I could share my story, it provided people with a path forward. And in this moment, when you're having a mental health crisis, whether it's in your own life or your children's or your friends or network, family, employees, it's really important. So anyway, thanks for inviting me to be a part of the show. I'll look forward to that in January.
No, thank you for joining us, and thank you for giving us this opportunity, Carol. I know we're approaching the end of the hour. Before I turn it over to you, I just want to make reference, if people notice, that I'm wearing my Live United t-shirt, but this is the one that was given to me by the staff of United Way of Snohomish County when I left, and they signed it all over the front, if you can see. I actually haven't taken this off the hangers since 2013. I actually have never worn this shirt until today. But I'm so proud. And one of the things I mentioned that I'd been part of United Way Next, Carol, it's just been a thrill to work on the marketing committee for United Way Next over the last few years. It's just been a great way to give back to, what arguably was really the best professional experience I've had working at United Way worldwide, being able to work with local United Way staff around the world, not just in the US, helping with social media and marketing and branding, crisis communications, disaster communications. Our hearts go out to everyone who We're impacted by Helene last week and Milton today. But that's where I always thought United Way really shined in helping communities. So thank you for this opportunity, Carol. I know you have a few announcements before we close, so I want to turn it over to you.
Well, before everybody takes, the chance to step off this session, there's a couple things I'd like to do. First, I want to say thanks to Neil and Dawn and just really appreciate you being here. We can give them a round of applause or a thumbs up or a heart emoji, whatever we want to do. And then I also want to take a moment to acknowledge Caitlin Guest. Today is the last day that she will participate in one of our events as an employee on our team. Tomorrow, she is moving on to a new opportunity, and we're wishing her well in this journey. An announcement went out to our members, but for those of you who may not receive those emails, we just want you to know that we've really appreciated all that Caitlin has done. So Caitlin, thanks for everything. You've been a treasure for us, and you really helped us move forward with our events over the last few years. So blessings on your journey, and I hope it all goes really well. And then lastly, I want to remind everyone that this is actually our last wellness session of the year. We have been featuring 4 wellness sessions this year, and last year I think we had 3. I want to encourage you, if you have not already seen the request for presenters email that went out, we do have it on our website. We can include it in this follow-up email. So if you're listening to this afterwards, we're encouraging people who may want to present on any topic in 2025 to be a part of that journey by making the submission. And specifically for you here who might have an interest in wellness or mental health, we would advocate for you to submit a session for consideration in 2025. So Ivy, I'm looking at you on the screen because you had some great comments and I know you're a fierce advocate. So with that said, we have a lot of events coming up over the next few weeks. Our United Way Worldwide Town Hall is coming up on the 31st of October. Next Thursday, the 17th, which will be right before Neil and Dawn do their session. We have a social hour that's going to be hosted by Kelly Krebs and Chris Preston, who are both former United Way Worldwide employees, and Chris is currently working at Metro Chicago. So if you know Kelly or Chris, that might be a really fun activity to participate in. So Caitlin's putting a lot of the information in the chat, and we'll make sure that that is also included in follow-up. So again, thanks to everybody for being here. It's always a pleasure to see you, and we wish you the best on World Mental Health Day, and have a great weekend ahead. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us. It was
Thank you.
Incredible pleasure.
Thank you.